This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the Bottom Feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how your attitude, whether negative or positive, can really transform your pool business. And I'll cite a recent trip I took to Boston and Chicago, and I talked to many Uber drivers on various things, and I got a good sense of how a positive and how a negative attitude can really affect your business model, and I'll share those with you here today. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. It's really a lot more than thinking positive. That's really hard to do in a lot of cases. You can't really just say, I'll just think positive thoughts and things will turn around. Sometimes you're actually in an environment where things are really negative or negatively affecting your business, and to have a positive attitude is not something you can just generate by thinking happy thoughts, if that makes sense. And I really think it's a detriment to you if you ignore the negative and just try to put a positive spin on everything, because that's not going to turn things around. What needs to be done actually, and the reason why I brought up the Uber drivers is because a lot of them were in Chicago and Boston. In particular, I went to both cities. I had an event in Chicago, and then I actually had an event in Boston the very next day after the Chicago event. So I was able to take tours of both cities. I spent some time in downtown Chicago, which I highly recommend. Is a really unique city with the river down the center, and there's a lot of activities to do. And then, of course, Boston has a lot of historical significance, and it's a great city to visit as well. I mean, where else can you see the building where the Declaration of Independence was read from? It's really interesting that, Boston has so much history surrounding it, and you'll probably not have enough time there to see everything. But back to the Uber driver. So one thing I like to do when I'm with Uber, and I took several of these, renting a car is not an option for me because, first of all, I've heard that Boston was a very hard city to get around. And in truth, that was for sure the case because one Uber driver turned down a one-way street in an accident. Another one forgot which intersection to turn on. And they've both been in the city pretty much their whole lives. And it's one of those things where it's a confusing place to drive around. And in Chicago, there's like zero parking. So renting a car there is just not a smart thing to do. So I took these Uber rides. And most Uber drivers are doing this on the side to generate income because they're maybe working a regular job. But a lot of them were trying to start their own business. And Uber was one avenue where they can kind of get their feet wet. They're running a business of sorts, working for Uber, and then they were trying to do other things. And most of them, the majority of them, were interested in investing in real estate. So that's kind of my secondary area that I have some specialty in. I've been in real estate since 2001 with several rental properties and a lot of experience in that area. And one thing that struck me was the attitude of some of the Uber drivers. There were some that were really negative. They didn't really think they could succeed in something. Others were very positive and, thought that they could do really well. A lot of them were saving up a lot of cash to invest in real estate. So they were really positive about it. And I think when I started talking to them and the ones that were negative, I started giving them more or less a play-by-play game plan of what to do if they were interested in investing in real estate. And I remember one of the drivers was he just had a degree from finance from one of the local universities. And by the way, there are like 200 colleges in Massachusetts, which is pretty crazy. But then he was asking me all these questions, what's your return on investment, REI, and what's the cap rate of these real estate investments? And I was just trying to explain to him that those are not how you define real estate. There's a lot of tax benefits on the other end, and there's also the appreciation, and then there's the value of the property. If you invest in stocks, of course, you can make money every year, depending if the market goes up 10% or 15%. But at the end of the day, you don't really own anything. You can't, sell, or I guess you can sell your shares of IBM and, other companies, but there's nothing tangible that is actually yours that you can actually drive by. I guess you can drive by the headquarters of a company you invest in. But real estate, of course, you have a tangible investment that you can convert with a 1031 exchange to a bigger property, or you can sell and get all the money out, get all the equity that's built up in there over the years. And regardless of anything, after 30 years, you're going to have a property generating rental income that's free and clear with no mortgage on it. And that's why I invest heavily in real estate. I think it's the best investment. Not only can you pass on this investment to your kids later, but it's something tangible, something that goes up in value, and something that's going to generate rental income later. Again, mortgage free after at least 30 years if you don't refinance it and don't pay it off early. Your tenants are actually paying the mortgage for you, and you have some cash flow in most cases. So the attitude, again, was a mix of negative, some neutral, and some positive. And one thing I realized is that those with a negative attitude, they were correct, especially in Boston, where most duplexes were selling for like $1 million, which is pretty crazy. And, realistically, they have to get $250,000 or $300,000 cash as a down payment and then compete against other people trying to buy these properties. It's a really competitive real estate market, and it's not a market that is positive or will give you a positive attitude in most cases. Now in Chicago, it's a lot like California, where there's a lot of areas that, the South Side, which is probably not the best area, but you can buy really affordable housing in certain areas of Chicago. So it was not nearly as bad as Boston, but I understood the negative attitude. And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. And I understand negative attitudes in pool service when you're in an area where it's like highly competitive and people are underbidding you. You're trying to get a decent rate of $160 a month or $180 a month, and there's people out there bidding $100 a month or $110 or $90 a month, undercutting your service business. There's always going to be somebody who's just starting out, not knowing anything about business really, not really wanting to make a profit, just wanting to get into the business and undercutting everyone out there, causing a big problem in your area, providing poor service in a lot of cases. So I definitely understand in a competitive area how that can be frustrating. I can understand here in my area where it's really hard to get a good service rate. California is probably one of the, I'm not sure if it is, I can look it up, but it's one of the most expensive, especially Los Angeles County areas to live in as far as rent, housing costs, cost of fuel, cost of food. I just bought orange juice the other day. It was like $8 for not even a gallon of orange juice. I was like, wow, what happened here? So, it's one of those things where everything is super expensive in my area. And it's something, when I went to Chicago and I was at the restaurants there, I actually thought they were inexpensive. And most people, of course, probably think they're expensive because they're coming from other states where, a hamburger is not $12. Here in California, that's like the norm. And it's, except for In-N-Out Burger, of course. And it's one of those things where it was, I understand that we're in an area that is really expensive, and then at the same time we have customers that push back on any kind of rate increase or any kind of fair market value for pool service, and it's very frustrating. And so a negative attitude can develop really fast there. So one thing that I realized when I was talking to these drivers that had a negative attitude, especially in Boston, where a lot of them were like, I can't afford anything. I started talking to them about some realistic options that they can look into. One of them I mentioned just buying on the outskirts, or maybe even relocating, because he was very mobile. He didn't have to be in Boston, and he was talking about Texas and Connecticut, and I was giving him encouragement that, if you're doing this and you're working somewhere where you can transfer your work, why not move somewhere where it's more affordable? And he started getting more and more positive about the idea. And so I think one thing to combat negative business attitudes is a positive strategy. So if you're in an area where you're getting a lot of pushback on your service rates, why not have more tiered service available in your area to increase some revenue? What I'm saying is, if you're just doing full service and you realize that a lot of customers don't really want that or don't want to pay for that, offer a chemical-only service with skimming and brushing, or offer a chemical-only service so you can just check the chemicals and you get some accounts. Why don't you expand out and start doing some hot tubs? Standalone hot tubs are a great service market in my area. Someone will call you with a hot tub and want service. They're usually pretty easy to maintain unless it's an Airbnb, and most people will start using them at the beginning and then they'll taper off their usage. So they're somewhat easy to maintain once you get a handle on it, and it's a great way to get some service accounts that pay pretty well and that are really short. You're not going to spend more than 5 minutes at the hot tub and move on to the next one. If you have 6 or 7 of those on your route, they can really boost your income, and you don't have to worry about trying to fight for those customers in those areas where you can't get the right service rate to support your business. You can do other things like look at your overall business plan and model. Maybe you're driving too expensive of a vehicle and you can downgrade to a truck that costs less, sell your truck and get something cheaper. If there's a lot of competition in your area, maybe set yourself apart by, branding your company better. I wouldn't suggest spending $3,000 on a truck wrap unless you think that's going to really move the needle. The truck wrap, in my opinion, will make you look more professional. It may not garner a lot of leads with people looking at your truck and calling you from your vehicle wrap, but it is going to make you look more professional, and that may be enough to give you the edge over your competitor when you show up to do a bid. Of course, have uniforms, look clean, and have a good appearance. I found that the most positive Uber drivers, and this is interesting, were the ones that were driving the Uber Black. These are the ones driving like the big SUVs, the Cadillac Escalades, the Lincolns. I used those services once in a while when the price was, almost the same as a regular Uber, and they were faster to pick us up. And these drivers, of course, a lot of them had businesses at the airport where they had clients that would fly in and they would pick them up specifically at the airport. And I think 2 of them specifically had that business. They didn't have anything else they were doing except picking people up at the airport, and they're really nice SUVs, which, by the way, they're really nice. I came back and I looked up the Cadillac Escalade, and, just to get like the base model new is like $110,000. It was like mind-blowing how expensive these Cadillac Escalades are, and they're pretty highly rated. If you wanted to get the electric version, it's like $150,000, which is crazy. But if you're doing a business where you're picking up clients at the airport and charging them $150 to take them back to their home, you can pretty much afford that vehicle and pay for something like that, especially if that's your only business and you're actually doing that. And he was doing Uber Black to make a little extra money in between waiting for his clients at the airport. So very good business model, very positive, and because he was making really good money. And I was thinking that a lot of the Uber drivers that were driving regular vehicles may want to expand up, maybe not buy a new one, but buy a slightly used vehicle and get into that Uber Black category. A lot of the Uber drivers complained about a lot of competition because anyone can do Uber, and so they were having a lot of trouble with people competing against them. And then, of course, it's a very seasonal area, Chicago and Boston, so they make all their money in the summer, and in the winter they make a lot less money, have to do other things. All these things, I think, combined to give me a good idea of how to translate this over to the pool industry. And so I got a lot of good information from another business segment, which is Uber, and how, the attitudes affect their business. And I found almost to a fault that every single driver with a negative attitude was not successful with either Uber or his other business, and every driver that was kind of somewhat positive, not, extremely positive, was okay with the competition. They understood that a lot of people do Uber. Didn't really affect them too much. They realized that they're going to get enough business if they're good at what they do, and if they're in a good area, if they patrol a nice area of the city. So a lot of them knew already what areas to kind of go around to get the most tourists, to pick up the most people. The ones that were kind of negative were just kind of like doing it on the side and not really thinking about those kind of details. Like, hey, what if I stay in this area of the city? I'll probably make a lot more money. Or what if I start an airport service where I pick up people at the airport, develop a list of business clients that come in all the time, and be available to pick them up every time they come in to Boston or Chicago. Those are the people that were being successful. So again, positive attitude is not enough. You can't ignore the negative and talk your way out of it. You have to find some realistic strategies to improve your business so that that positive attitude comes automatically with your business doing well. I know it's one of those kind of circular logics. You're positive because you're doing well in business. How do you get positive? Well, by doing well in business. But I think it all starts with looking at the negative in a way that's not kind of whitewashing it and saying, well, things will get better. There'll be less Uber drivers next year. It's not going to work in that business. You have to kind of get new strategies and work on getting your business to the level where there are positive results. So those that were negative had negative business results. And of course, they're not going to succeed in anything they do, really, I don't think, because of their negative attitude. One of the drivers in particular was bidding on all these duplexes in Boston. And I was asking him some questions that were pretty logical. I said, well, are you bidding with enough down payment? And of course, first he was like, well, I was a little short at first. I didn't have the 25%. And so I would make bids with $150,000 down and I was getting outbid. Well, obviously, without the down payment, the agent's not going to even start the process with you because they can't get the loan. And why even accept your offer if you don't have the 25% down? And then, he started thinking about that for a minute. Like, yeah, that's logical. Why would anyone take my offer if I can't get the loan? And then I also told him what area you're looking at. And he's looking mainly in the downtown Boston area, which is highly competitive. And I said, well, I was just over at a friend's in a neighboring city. And, it's like 20 minutes outside of Boston. And there was a lot of opportunities in that city. Why don't you look over there? And I guess it never dawned on him that, hey, why don't I look 20 or 30 minutes outside the city? Why am I so focused on that area where everything is like $1 million or 1.5 million and I don't have the money for it? I mean, if you have $150,000 or $200,000, you can invest in real estate. I mean, you have a pretty good amount of money, but you just have to be kind of smart about it. Pick areas where it's not hyper competitive. And I was looking at some of the Boston listings for duplexes, and it's like open house today from 11 to 1. All offers are due by 3 p.m. I mean, it was like super competitive. I was like, wow, you're not going to be able to get nothing if you're bidding, if that's how that, investment properties are going in Boston. And so just go further out. I mean, the one that I mentioned that he can relocate was like getting more excited about it. And it's a smart idea. If you can't make it in a certain area, why not move? There's been several pool guys that have moved from one location to another, Arizona to maybe the East Coast or East Coast to Las Vegas, because it's a better market. And so that's not something that should be off the table. If you're in an area in Florida where there's more pool companies than there are pools, maybe that's not your area, and you should think about relocating somewhere where you can do really good business. So think of ideas and ways that are going to make your business successful. And that's just not positive thinking. That's taking real action to make a positive impact on your business to make it better. And there's a lot of things you can do to make your business better. And once you start thinking about these things and planning them, writing them down and thinking positive, it's going to really translate into success. A couple of the Uber drivers where I was giving a lot of realistic ideas to, they didn't want to stop and get out. They don't want me to get out of the car. They were like, okay, what can I do here? What should I do here? And this really helped them formulate a plan that really turned some of their negativity into positivity. And I really think they're going to be really successful in their investing because they are getting more ideas now. And a lot of them are going to start thinking about different ways of using the money they have. A lot of them had a lot of money. They just couldn't buy in the area of where they were at. And, ironically, that's the same problem in Los Angeles County, is that everything is so expensive that even I wouldn't be able to invest anymore in Los Angeles County. I do have 3 properties in the county, but I went to a different county neighboring it because it's just too expensive now to where it doesn't make any sense for me to invest in my own county, in my own area. So I go out about 50 minutes to an hour and invest in outlying areas because it's just way too expensive to invest in Los Angeles County for myself. And, next to me is Orange County, and forget about that. I mean, you can't even get anything in Orange County unless you are, you're a doctor and a lawyer, or maybe you have a pool company with 5 trucks and you can maybe buy a house or investment properties there. So think a little bit outside your area if you're investing in real estate. And it's okay if you have to drive an hour to your property because you're not going there that often, and you have your own vendors that are going to do all the repairs for you. And it's not a big deal in my opinion. Now, would I buy out of state? I don't think I would necessarily buy out of state because there's a whole different rules of, how they assess properties there. Property tax may not be the same. You don't know the areas as well. And so I would say if you can find areas in your immediate area that you can expand out to, that's better. And these were all ideas I was giving the driver. So if you're also thinking about investing in real estate, kind of expand out a little bit, think of different opportunities. And of course, watch a lot of YouTube videos. I told one of the drivers, hey, just go on YouTube and watch all these real estate experts on there. They're going to give you a lot of great advice. And that's the key as well. So bottom line, a negative attitude, of course, will drive your business into negative territory. People aren't charging enough in my area. I can't get ahead in my area. It's really expensive for chemicals. I'm spending a lot of money on chemicals. Try passing some of those costs out to the customers if you can. And then on the other side, be positive about expanding your business. Think of new ideas to get clients. Think of new ways to market yourself. And I guarantee you, if you start to do that, you're going to start getting a more positive attitude as you get more aggressive. And that translates into a very positive business. If you're looking for other podcasts, you can find those on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. You click on the podcast icon. There'll be a drop-down menu of other podcasts there for you. And if you're interested, you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Monday through Friday, I post an episode there. And I also have a coaching program that you can find out more about if you go to poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week. God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.